What if I told you a luxury cruise ship that vanished in 2000 has just been found, frozen solid between two icebergs? No distress call. No debris. No human remains in sight. Just a fully intact vessel, entombed in ice like a time capsule from the past. This isn't a Hollywood plot twist or a viral internet hoax. This is real. And it's sending shockwaves through the maritime world. The discovery was made in the southernmost reaches of the Antarctic peninsula, where temperatures rarely rise above freezing and icebergs the size of skyscrapers drift silently across a frozen sea. Scientists monitoring climate shifts and polar melt patterns stumbled upon something extraordinary: a large, metallic object wedged tightly between two massive ice walls. Satellite images revealed it first, but it was only when drones were deployed that the outline became unmistakable. A cruise ship. Perfectly preserved. As if it had been waiting to be found. This was no ordinary vessel. Records identified it as the MS Atlantic Spirit, a mid-sized luxury cruise ship that had mysteriously disappeared in the year 2000 during what was supposed to be a routine South Pacific voyage. The last transmission from the bridge was calm. Routine check-ins. Clear weather. And then, silence. Search and rescue missions scoured thousands of nautical miles for weeks, but no sign of the ship was ever found. Until now. What makes this frozen ship discovery even more baffling is what was found on board. Early reports described tables still set for dinner, linens crisp and untouched, clothing neatly folded in cabins, and digital clocks frozen at the exact same moment, 3:17 a.m. No passengers. No crew. No signs of struggle. It was as if the entire ship had been abandoned in an instant, and then sealed into the ice by some force of nature, or something else entirely. As details emerge, new questions are rising faster than answers. How did a cruise ship from the South Pacific end up thousands of miles away, in one of the most inhospitable and remote regions on Earth? Why didn't any radar system detect its drift across international waters? And why has there been no official comment from maritime authorities? This video explores a real ship mystery unlike any ever recorded. Based on declassified satellite data, first-hand accounts from oceanographers, recovered black box fragments, and historical anomalies from similar cases, we're about to unravel the chilling truth behind the world's most haunting maritime disappearance. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear goes beyond the simple tale of a missing cruise ship. This is a story of vanished lives, a ship frozen in time, and a discovery that may rewrite what we know about our oceans, our history, and the fragile boundary between fact and legend. Welcome to the frozen ship mystery of the MS Atlantic Spirit. When the sea took everything, the MS Atlantic Spirit was never meant to vanish. Built in the late 1980s, this mid-sized luxury cruise ship was known for its elegant design, spacious decks, and world-class amenities. It was owned by Ocean Vista Cruises, a reputable European company with a long-standing record of safe transoceanic voyages. By the time it departed on its fateful journey in January 2000, the ship had completed over 100 successful routes. The voyage began from Auckland, New Zealand, with the final destination set for Valparaiso, Chile, charting a course through the South Pacific and rounding the southern tip of South America. The route was popular among adventurous tourists and seasoned travelers seeking the thrill of remote coastlines, glacier views, and isolated islands. On board were 213 passengers, including couples, families, retirees, and a handful of solo travelers, along with 87 crew members. A diverse mix of people from across the world, most of them eager to experience one of the last untouched marine frontiers. The ship departed on January 11, 2000. The initial days of the voyage were uneventful, with sunny skies and calm waters reported throughout. The Atlantic Spirit was equipped with state-of-the-art navigation systems and satellite communication, including weather tracking capabilities and real-time emergency alert protocols. According to the logs recovered later, the last official communication was received at 9:43 p.m. on January 16. It was a routine weather check-in near latitude 54 degrees south, longitude 118 degrees west, somewhere in the desolate waters between New Zealand and the South American coast. No distress. No mechanical issues. Just business as usual. Then, radio silence. For the first 12 hours, it wasn't alarming. Ships in remote zones sometimes experience brief communication blackouts. But as the hours stretched into a full day, and then two, the absence of contact triggered a full-scale alert. Ocean Vista activated emergency protocols. Naval authorities in Chile and New Zealand were contacted. The International Maritime Network was put on notice. Search and rescue units from multiple countries launched a coordinated search across an area spanning over 2 million square kilometers. Aircraft, satellites, and surface ships scoured the ocean for any trace, debris, oil slicks, flares, or even a floating lifeboat. Nothing was found. Weather conditions remained relatively stable in the search zone, which only deepened the mystery. Satellite imagery from the days following the ship's disappearance showed no signs of a storm, no rogue waves, and no iceberg activity in the expected area. The ocean was calm and indifferent, as if it had swallowed the ship whole without leaving a single ripple in its wake. As the days turned into weeks, the world began to take notice. News stations across the globe reported on the incident under bold headlines like, "Luxury cruise ship vanishes without a trace," and "Mystery at sea. How did a ship disappear in clear weather?" The media was relentless. Families of the missing appeared on talk shows, held vigils, and pleaded for answers. Rumors swirled about piracy, mechanical failure, even alien abduction. But there were no answers. Only silence. By March of that year, with mounting pressure and dwindling resources, the official search was scaled back. The ship was declared lost at sea. Compensation was paid to the families, memorials were held, and the maritime world quietly closed the chapter. A ship had disappeared into one of the most remote corners of the Earth, and no one knew how or why. Maritime experts at the time proposed various theories. One suggested a catastrophic hull breach due to an undetected underwater collision. Another speculated about a power failure that left the ship adrift and eventually sunk. But every theory had holes. No debris ever surfaced. No life jackets washed ashore. And most damning of all, no emergency beacon was triggered. The MS Atlantic Spirit had simply vanished. For over 2 decades, the case became a grim example of how even in the age of global positioning systems and real-time tracking, the ocean could still make things disappear. It was cited in maritime safety manuals and occasionally resurrected in conspiracy forums online. A cruise ship vanishes. A crew lost at sea. A vessel that disappeared without a trace. The world moved on, but the mystery never fully faded. That is, until it was found. Frozen in time. Trapped between 2 towering icebergs in a place no one had thought to look. A place so remote, it defied all logic. The South Pacific route never touched polar waters. No one expected the Atlantic Spirit to drift so far south. But that's where the story begins again. A discovery so bizarre, so chilling, it's forcing scientists and historians to re-examine everything they thought they knew about the day the sea took everything. The icy discovery that changed everything. In early 2024, a team of climate researchers from an international polar monitoring initiative were tracking iceberg drift patterns near the remote Weddell Sea, deep within the Antarctic Circle. Their mission was not to find lost vessels, but to study the accelerated collapse of ice shelves due to warming ocean currents. But as satellite imagery swept over a vast expanse of shifting ice, something appeared that didn't belong. Amid the dense, bluish-white landscape was a shape too symmetrical to be natural. A structure. A silhouette. At first, the researchers assumed it might be a remnant of old Soviet outposts or a recently carved glacier with sharp edges. But when high-resolution scans came back, doubt gave way to shock. It was a ship. A large one. Suspended between 2 converging icebergs like a bug caught between panes of glass. Its hull jutted out on both sides, visibly crushed in parts by slow, unforgiving pressure. But the structure was remarkably intact. The distinctive upper deck, the shape of the funnel, and the outline of the bridge, there was no mistaking it. This was a cruise liner, and a well-preserved one at that. When the coordinates were cross-referenced with international shipping records, the impossible became undeniable. The frozen ship discovery was none other than the MS Atlantic Spirit, the luxury cruise ship that had vanished without a trace 24 years earlier. It wasn't at the bottom of the sea as many had assumed. It hadn't been hijacked or dismantled in secret. It had somehow drifted, or been carried, into one of the coldest, most isolated places on Earth and remained hidden in the ice ever since. The news didn't reach the public immediately. The initial discovery, recorded by orbiting satellites, was quickly marked classified by the agency overseeing the expedition. But researchers on the ground, unable to contain their disbelief, deployed drones to capture footage of the scene. These videos, which were never meant to be released, were leaked within days by an anonymous insider. The footage went viral within hours. The ship loomed in the midst of a stark white wasteland, its decks covered in snow, windows still intact, railings iced over. There was no visible damage from fire or collision, no broken lifeboats dangling from their rigs. One clip showed a drone peering through a frost-covered window where a grand piano sat untouched in the lounge. Chairs remained tucked neatly around tables. Plates and cutlery were still in place. It was as if the ship had been abandoned mid-meal and then sealed into a glacial crypt. Social media exploded with hashtags like Frozen Ship Discovery, Antarctic Ship Mystery, and Cruise Ship Found After 24 Years. The world was stunned. How could such a large vessel go unnoticed for over 2 decades? How had it drifted this far south without a trace? And why had no one heard a word from the governments involved? As speculation soared, official responses were conspicuously absent. Neither Ocean Vista Cruises nor any major maritime authority issued a public statement. Independent journalists who tried to travel to the coordinates were denied access or met with radio silence. The more people asked, the more the silence grew deafening. Scientists speculated that changes in sea currents, especially with the acceleration of polar melt, could have slowly carried the vessel southward over time. But this theory came with its own problems. No ship of that size could travel undetected through some of the most closely monitored shipping lanes in the world. Not without activating emergency beacons, not without showing up on even the oldest satellite scans. The rediscovered cruise ship had seemingly bypassed the eyes of the modern world until the ice decided to give up its secret. Whispers of a cover-up began to circulate. Was the ship hidden on purpose? Were its movements concealed by governments or private interests for reasons unknown? Some theorized that the ship had been subject to unauthorized experiments, or that it had been carrying something more valuable than passengers. Others believed that the Earth itself had simply taken the ship, and in doing so, exposed just how little control humanity truly has over the vast, merciless oceans. Whatever the cause, one truth stood frozen in the ice. The Atlantic spirit was back. It had returned not through a broadcast, a rescue, or a beacon, but through a haunting visual, a ship entombed in time, surrounded by nothing but wind, ice, and questions. Rediscovered after 24 years, its story was just beginning again, in a way no one could have ever imagined. A time capsule sealed in ice. When the first research team managed to board the Atlantic Spirit after the initial drone footage sent shockwaves through the internet, what they found was not a ruined wreck or a gutted hulk ravished by the ocean. What they stepped into was a frozen time capsule ship, perfectly preserved in a way no one could have anticipated. The icy silence was overwhelming. It wasn't just a ship, this was a moment in time, sealed shut by nature's coldest force. The dining hall, once filled with laughter, now stood in eerie stillness. Tables were still set with polished silverware and wine glasses. A half-empty bottle of Merlot sat uncorked near a window, frozen mid-drip. Napkins were folded with precision. Menus dated January 16, 2000, lay on each plate, announcing a 5-course dinner that was never served. The ghost ship interior held no signs of panic or sudden evacuation. No overturned chairs. No shattered plates. Everything was in its place, as if the ship had simply paused and never resumed. Cabins told similar stories. Suitcases remained neatly zipped on luggage racks. Toiletries lined bathroom counters, untouched. Beds were made. Clothing was still hung in closets, winter jackets, evening dresses, hiking boots neatly paired and ready. Personal items, like paperback novels, children's toys, and travel journals, were all present, covered only by a thin layer of frost. One journal entry ended mid-sentence, frozen on the page, the ink still legible but smeared by moisture. Even more bizarre was the galley, the ship's kitchen. The walk-in freezers had long lost power, yet the food inside remained preserved. Vegetables still held their color. Raw meat had not decayed. In the main cold storage area, several prepared meals sat on trays, as if the chefs were just moments away from delivering them to guests. There was no mold, no rot, no insects. Just the deep, penetrating cold that had frozen everything in place. Navigation logs and digital systems provided another layer to the mystery. The ship's digital clock systems all displayed the same time, 3:17 a.m. The final log entry, recorded manually by the first officer, detailed routine sailing conditions and light wind activity. Then, without warning, the sentence trailed off mid-word. The ink line extended across the page, as if the pen had been yanked away. No further entries followed. Investigators later determined that the temperature on board had dropped so rapidly that it preserved not only the ship, but everything within it to a near cryogenic level. This level of preservation was almost unnatural. Glaciologists brought in to analyze the scene were stunned. The airlock effect created by the icebergs, combined with the salt content of the surrounding sea and extreme wind shielding, had essentially turned the entire vessel into a deep freezer. Ice formed in layers, creeping slowly through ventilation shafts, sealing doors shut, and covering surfaces inch by inch. This created what scientists described as the perfect environmental coffin: dry, airtight, and sub-zero stable. As word of the ghost ship's interior spread, theories began to multiply. How could a ship be preserved with such perfection? Why were there no signs of chaos or emergency? Where did the passengers and crew go? Not a single body was found on board. No distress messages were recovered. Not one emergency exit had been used. The lifeboats were still secured, untouched and frozen to the davits. Whatever happened to the Atlantic Spirit, it had occurred in utter silence, without panic, and without resistance. Many began to call it a modern-day Mary Celeste, the legendary ghost ship found abandoned in the Atlantic in 1872. But the Atlantic Spirit was something else entirely. It wasn't just abandoned, it was embalmed by nature itself. A ship preserved in ice, caught in the moment like a scene from a forgotten dream. Media outlets that managed to circumvent the blackout dubbed it the most haunting maritime rediscovery of the century. Photos of the frozen grand piano, the crystal chandelier still sparkling under layers of frost, and the captain's bridge shrouded in white mist were shared across platforms with captions like "Ship preserved in ice" and "Frozen cruise ship time capsule." But these images only deepened the unease. This was not the aftermath of a natural disaster. It was as if the Atlantic Spirit had crossed into another realm and returned, untouched by time but stripped of all its souls. There were whispers among the research team that stepping into the ship felt unnatural. Not just cold, but wrong. As if something had frozen more than just matter, something had halted time itself. The eerie preservation, the absence of life, the lack of struggle. It all defied logic. The Atlantic Spirit was no longer just a ship. It was now a question carved into the ice. The lives left behind. The Atlantic Spirit wasn't just a vessel. It was a floating world carrying dreams, laughter, and lives that were never meant to end in mystery. When the ship vanished in 2000, it didn't just become another maritime statistic. It became a tragedy deeply etched into the hearts of hundreds of families, and now, after 24 years, the rediscovery of the ship has reopened old wounds and unearthed new questions that are even harder to face. Among the passengers were newlyweds from London on their honeymoon, both in their 20s, having chosen the remote South Pacific route for its romance and tranquility. They had sent postcards from Auckland just days before departure, excited to begin their journey. There was a retired couple from Toronto, both former schoolteachers, embarking on what they called the final grand adventure. A single mother from Sao Paulo traveled with her 7-year-old daughter. A university group from Japan had booked a research-focused trip, hoping to study marine biology along the route. In total, 213 passengers from 14 different countries boarded the ship, and none were ever seen again. The crew, a tight-knit international team of 87 members, was just as diverse. The captain, Victor Hansen, was a veteran of the Scandinavian maritime world with over 30 years at sea and a flawless record. His first officer, Miguel Torres, a Chilean national, was known for his precision and professionalism. The ship's hospitality team included chefs, stewards, and entertainers from across Europe and Asia. Many had signed on for a 6-month contract, hoping to save for their families back home. Interviews with surviving family members, recorded over the years and resurfacing now with new relevance, reveal a recurring theme. None of the people on that ship had plans for anything but life. They were engaged, hopeful, and entirely unaware that their journey would be their last. Some of the eeriest details to emerge from passenger records involve striking similarities between certain individuals. A handful of passengers had recently retired from positions within intelligence or diplomatic services. Others were linked to scientific institutions or private research firms. Though perhaps coincidental, some researchers now speculate whether this was more than a pleasure cruise. Was there someone or something on board that made the ship a target? Was the passenger manifest random, or curated? Among the most unsettling discoveries from within the ship was a handwritten log found in the crew quarters, apparently belonging to Miguel Torres, the first officer. Unlike the standard technical entries kept on the bridge, this one was personal. In its final entry, dated January 16, just hours before the ship's disappearance, Torres wrote, "The sky tonight feels heavier than usual. It's as if we're being watched by something older than the sea. I can't explain it, but the crew feels it too. It's in the air, something's about to change." These last words from crew have reignited speculation, especially among those who believe the disappearance was no accident. The language is poetic, even prophetic, far from the calculated tone expected from an experienced officer. Some suggest it was simply exhaustion, the product of long shifts and isolation. Others believe it may point to an awareness of something beyond routine, a presence, an event, or even a premonition. Family members who spent years searching for closure are now grappling with the emotional weight of this rediscovery. For many, the return of the ship only amplifies the grief. The pain of the unknown, which had dulled with time, is now raw once again. One daughter of a missing crew member said in an interview, "We always hoped he'd come back, or that someone would tell us what happened. But knowing the ship was out there all along, still frozen with their things, but without them, it's like losing him twice." These missing people on the cruise ship were more than names on a passenger list. They were mothers, fathers, children, colleagues, dreamers. And their absence raises more than just emotional questions. It challenges everything we know about maritime security, natural law, and the fragility of life in the face of the unknown. The Atlantic Spirit has returned, but its passengers remain missing. No bodies were found. No escape attempts are evident. The cabins show no signs of fear, nor preparation. They are simply empty. Whatever happened, happened swiftly, silently, and without resistance. This passenger disappearance mystery is not just about a ship frozen in ice. It's about hundreds of lives stopped mid-sentence, their final moments locked in a riddle that science, governments, and even time have yet to solve. And perhaps the most chilling truth of all is that the Atlantic Spirit is no longer missing, but the people who once filled it still are. When technology failed to see in the year 2000, the world was already heavily reliant on technology to monitor movement across the seas. Commercial vessels like the Atlantic Spirit were equipped with GPS transponders, automatic identification systems, radar, and satellite-based communication arrays. Maritime authorities maintained detailed shipping lane records, while satellites routinely captured data from vast stretches of ocean. So how did a fully operational cruise ship, nearly 300 meters long, simply disappear from every known tracking system? Back then, the global maritime tracking infrastructure was advanced but not as airtight as today's systems. Satellite coverage over certain remote oceanic regions had gaps. Real-time ASH tracking was still evolving, and not every vessel was required to transmit continuous location data, especially in international waters. But even by the standards of 2000, the disappearance of the Atlantic Spirit made no sense. The ship was supposed to report its location every 4 hours. Its transponder was inspected just before departure. Weather conditions were mild. Yet, after the final 9:43 p.m. check-in, there was no transmission, no location update, no emergency beacon, and no radar contact ever again. For 2 decades, investigators reviewed countless hypotheses about how cruise ships vanished. Most disappearances involved rough weather, navigational failure, or piracy. But the Atlantic Spirit left no clues behind. No debris field, no distress call, not even a single item adrift. It was as if the ship had crossed an invisible threshold and vanished into thin air. And now, with its rediscovery frozen in ice thousands of miles off course, questions about how technology missed this ship have reignited. Modern analysis of archival satellite data shows something even more bizarre. Between January 17 and February 10 of that year, multiple commercial satellites passed directly over the region the Atlantic Spirit was believed to be sailing through. None recorded its position. Thermal imaging caught weather patterns and other vessels in the vicinity, but not the Atlantic Spirit. Digital records contain nothing. It's as if the ship erased itself from the electromagnetic spectrum. Some maritime experts now believe the ship may have passed through a temporary magnetic anomaly. Such anomalies, while rare, can disrupt navigation instruments and communication signals. The South Pacific is home to one such region, known to interfere with magnetometers and even satellite sensors. Still, the idea that this anomaly could completely cloak a vessel of that size for weeks stretches the limits of current scientific understanding. Others propose a more unsettling possibility: technological manipulation. Could someone, or some entity, have deliberately disabled the ship's systems? Could its transponders have been overridden remotely? In the post-Cold War era, electronic warfare capabilities had already advanced significantly. Jamming devices, stealth coatings, and frequency disruption tools were no longer science fiction. While there is no public evidence to suggest the Atlantic Spirit was outfitted with such technology, the fact that no signal, no noise, and no echo was detected from a vessel of its magnitude is deeply troubling. Another angle being examined is whether the ship's disappearance was aided or concealed by external forces. In rare instances, rogue waves or sudden mechanical failures can render a vessel powerless, drifting for days or weeks. But such events usually leave a trail: distress calls, flares, visual sightings, or signs of damage. None were ever reported. And now, with the ship found intact, the theory of a catastrophic physical event loses even more ground. The stealth ship theory has begun circulating in both scientific circles and conspiracy forums. Some suggest the Atlantic Spirit may have unknowingly passed into a classified military testing zone. These zones, known to exist in the South Pacific, are occasionally used for weapons testing, satellite calibration, and submarine trials. Access is restricted, and surveillance is intense. Could the ship have entered one of these areas and been silenced to avoid disclosure? Could it have stumbled into something it wasn't meant to see? For 2 decades, the satellites missed a lost ship of massive proportions. Tracking systems failed. Radar stations recorded nothing. Even deep-sea sonar scans picked up no echoes. And yet, here the ship is, rediscovered after 24 years, perfectly frozen, without damage, but without life. The Atlantic Spirit's reappearance raises more than just questions about the past. It challenges the very reliability of the systems we trust to monitor our world. Today, with more satellites orbiting Earth than ever before, it's hard to imagine something so large could vanish again. But the fact that it happened once proves it's possible. It proves that somewhere between signal and silence, between coordinates and confusion, there is a blind spot. And in that blind spot, the Atlantic Spirit remained hidden, protected by ice, forgotten by time, and untouched by the technology that was supposed to ensure it could never be lost at sea. Cold truths and chilling theories. When a ship vanishes for 24 years and reappears frozen solid in one of the most remote places on Earth, theories are bound to surface. The Atlantic Spirit isn't just another maritime mystery. It has become a lightning rod for speculation, connecting dots that stretch from scientific anomalies to covert operations. And while some theories might sound far-fetched, others are rooted in real data, history, and the glaring gaps that no official explanation has yet filled. One of the most persistent ideas is that of government involvement. The disappearance of the Atlantic Spirit has always been too clean, too silent. No Mayday. No wreckage. No floating debris. The ship essentially vanished from existence at a time when satellite surveillance was already globally active. Its sudden reappearance in 2024, frozen between 2 Antarctic icebergs, has only intensified suspicion. Some believe that the vessel may have been intercepted deliberately, its signal jammed and its course halted. But why? Was it simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, or did it see something it shouldn't have? This theory ties closely with claims of the ship passing through a classified maritime testing zone. In such zones, both US and Allied governments conduct experimental naval trials. These areas are not marked on civilian maps, and any intrusion is met with silence. Could the Atlantic Spirit have entered one of these zones and become collateral damage in a top-secret operation? If so, removing it from all radar systems and letting it drift into oblivion might have been the simplest way to avoid exposure. A lost cruise ship cover-up sounds sensational, but for some, it's the only narrative that fits the facts. Then there's the ice shelf cloaking theory. Some researchers have pointed out the unusual structure of the iceberg system where the ship was found. The 2 massive ice formations that entombed the vessel had formed a natural tunnel, an ice corridor that could have created electromagnetic interference. This theory suggests that the formation acted like a Faraday cage, effectively blocking all radio signals and hiding the ship from satellite detection. But skeptics argue that the ship would have had to be in the perfect position for this to occur. Could this have been coincidence, or something designed? Linked to this is another controversial angle: climate geoengineering. In recent years, governments and private firms have experimented with modifying weather patterns to slow the impact of global warming. From spraying aerosols into the stratosphere to artificially stimulating cloud formations, these projects have grown in scale and complexity. Some theorists believe that the region where the Atlantic Spirit was found may have been part of a large-scale climate manipulation test, one that went wrong or was never meant to be revealed. Could the ship have drifted into a geo-engineered zone that rapidly froze everything? Could this explain the deep preservation and the sudden drop in temperature that experts still can't fully explain? But beyond the scientific and political angles lies another idea, that the ship was never what it seemed. There are whispers that the Atlantic Spirit may have been a decoy. A vessel disguised as a cruise liner, but in fact transporting something valuable or classified. Whether it was sensitive equipment, data, or even people, this theory assumes that the ship's manifest was incomplete or intentionally falsified. If this were the case, then the disappearance might not have been a tragedy but a cover for a black operation gone awry. These theories are not without precedent. The maritime world has a long history of ghost ships, vessels found adrift, seemingly abandoned, and often shrouded in mystery. The MV Joyita was discovered in 1955 with all 25 passengers and crew missing, the ship still afloat, cargo untouched. No lifeboats were ever recovered. Then there's the SS Beichimo, which was trapped in Arctic ice in 1931 and left to drift. It was spotted multiple times over the next 38 years, sailing on its own, a phantom of the sea. These cases, like the Atlantic Spirit, defy easy explanation. They challenge the notion that ships are always tracked, that people always leave clues, and that nature always tells the truth. The frozen ship conspiracy surrounding the Atlantic Spirit now echoes through online forums, late-night talk shows, and academic halls alike. It's an unsolved maritime mystery that pulls at the strings of reason and curiosity. The facts are simple. A ship disappeared without a trace, remained hidden for 24 years, then re-emerged in pristine condition, sealed in ice, and completely devoid of life. Everything else, the theories, the fears, the questions, fill the void left by silence. As the world continues to search for answers, one thing is clear. Whether the Atlantic Spirit was lost due to natural forces, human error, or a secret buried beneath waves and ice, its story is far from over. It is a chilling reminder that even in an age of satellites and surveillance, there are still places the light does not reach. Places where echoes across the sea. The Atlantic Spirit's icy return isn't the first time the ocean has offered back a vessel long thought lost. Maritime history is filled with real ghost ship stories, eerie tales of abandoned vessels, and ships that disappeared mysteriously, only to reappear in silence, without a crew, and often without explanation. These haunting case studies provide a chilling context to what has now happened with the Atlantic Spirit. They suggest that what happened to this ship may not be an isolated phenomenon, but part of a larger, stranger pattern within the vast and often unknowable world of the sea. One of the most famous cases is the MV Lyubov Orlova, a Soviet-built luxury cruise liner that became the subject of speculation and fear years after it was decommissioned. Built in the 1970s, the Lyubov Orlova operated for decades before being sold for scrap. In 2013, while being towed from Canada to the Dominican Republic, the ship broke free in international waters. It drifted aimlessly into the North Atlantic, completely uncrewed. With no emergency signals and no tracking devices active, it vanished from radar and became a floating ghost. Over the years, there were occasional satellite sightings, but it was never recovered. Some reports claimed the ship was filled with rats that had begun to cannibalize one another, but even those stories remained unconfirmed. The ship became legend, a luxurious shell adrift in one of the world's harshest environments. Another haunting example is the SS Bachimo, often referred to as the true ghost ship of the Arctic. In 1931, the Bachimo became trapped in pack ice off the coast of Alaska. After a failed rescue attempt, the crew was forced to abandon her. But the ship didn't sink. For decades, she roamed the Arctic, seen and boarded multiple times by whalers, Inuit hunters, and passing explorers. Still intact, still without a crew, the Bachimo was spotted as late as 1969, 38 years after being deserted. She resisted the fate of most vessels caught in ice, refusing to go down, instead becoming a phantom presence in the frozen north. The Bachimo's story became synonymous with ships that defy the elements and escape the grave, drifting silently where no human eyes can follow. Then there's the MV Alta, a more recent case that brought the phenomenon of abandoned vessels into the headlines again. The Alta, a cargo ship, was abandoned in 2018 in the mid-Atlantic after its engines failed and the crew was rescued. For 2 years, the ship floated aimlessly across the ocean without guidance. It was finally found in 2020 when it ran aground during a storm on the southern coast of Ireland. The Alta's return was unexpected and eerie. Authorities were baffled by how the ship had survived so long in open water without being tracked or located. The fact that it arrived onshore without warning, and in a place it was never meant to be, reignited fears about the blind spots of global monitoring and the sheer unpredictability of the ocean. In each of these stories, one theme remains constant: ghostly silence. Whether it's the Bachimo gliding through Arctic fog, the Lyubov Orlova slipping between radar coverage, or the Alta returning like a message in a bottle, these vessels shared more than just abandonment. They exhibited a resistance to discovery, a refusal to explain themselves. And now, the Atlantic spirit joins this gallery of maritime phantoms. There were no distress calls from any of these ships. No evidence of mutiny or sabotage. No consistent patterns of mechanical failure. And often, no bodies. The ocean did not give up the dead, nor did it surrender their final moments. The similarities between these abandoned vessels speak to a broader mystery, one that challenges the assumption that all things at sea can be seen, tracked, and explained. It highlights how easily a ship can slip through the cracks of our most sophisticated systems and become something more myth than machine. What makes the Atlantic Spirit stand apart, however, is its condition. While most ghost ships are discovered rusted and battered by years of waves and storms, the Atlantic Spirit was found frozen in time. The preservation of its interior, the untouched arrangement of belongings, and the complete absence of its crew elevate this discovery beyond the realm of anomaly. It's not just a ship that drifted away. It's a moment captured, sealed, and returned without answers. These real ghost ship stories lend weight to the possibility that the sea does more than hide its secrets, it keeps them. And once in a great while, it releases one back to the surface, not to offer clarity, but to remind us of the limits of human understanding. The Atlantic Spirit may be the most sensational, the most intact, and the most mysterious of them all, but it is far from alone in the haunted history of the world's oceans. Science meets silence. When the Atlantic Spirit was finally examined by scientists on the ground, the goal was clear: explain what happened using logic, data, and environmental science. The team of glaciologists, oceanographers, and climate researchers assembled for the investigation had decades of experience studying ice movement, sea currents, and polar conditions. They came prepared to debunk the myths and conspiracies. But what they encountered was something that defied even the most rational minds. The first approach was to trace how the ship might have drifted from its original route in the South Pacific all the way to the Antarctic. On paper, this seemed impossible. But when researchers reconstructed potential ice drift patterns and sea current data from the early 2000s, they found that under extremely rare conditions, a disabled vessel could theoretically be carried by the Antarctic circumpolar current. This current, which circles the continent uninterrupted, is the largest ocean current on Earth. If the ship had lost propulsion and remained afloat, it could have followed this path, slowly, silently, until finally reaching colder southern waters. But the idea that a cruise ship could go completely undetected for more than 2 decades along that journey remains a major hurdle. Even if drifting with minimal speed and power, such a large vessel should have appeared in satellite imagery, been spotted by other ships, or activated emergency equipment during weather shifts. The movement alone would have taken years, and yet the Atlantic Spirit seemed to arrive at its final location perfectly preserved, not torn apart or deteriorated. That's when scientists began to look at the ice itself. One theory suggested that the ship might not have drifted on water at all, but instead became lodged in floating ice, later pushed south by slow-moving glacial shelves. When icebergs carve from the Antarctic continent, they sometimes trap debris within their structure. Could the Atlantic Spirit have been caught in an ice mass and transported that way? While fascinating, this theory raised more questions than it answered. Glacier movement is slow, typically no more than a few meters per day, and the ship's pristine condition suggests minimal friction or damage. If it had been moved by a glacier, there would be crushing, compression, and deformation. Yet the ship's hull remains largely intact. Then came the carbon dating tests, which only deepened the mystery. Samples taken from inside the ship, wooden furniture, paper logs, even a partially burned candle, were tested and dated back to 1999 or earlier, exactly in line with the ship's disappearance. However, the ice surrounding the vessel, particularly layers closest to the hull, showed signs of forming far more recently. Some samples indicated growth within the past 8 to 10 years. This posed an impossible paradox. If the ship vanished in 2000, and the ice encasing it didn't form until years later, where was the ship in the meantime? Interviews with the glaciologists involved revealed a rare tone of uncertainty. Dr. Eleni Karvounis, an expert in polar ice dynamics, admitted in a press conference that she had never seen such a discrepancy in data. "We expect some dating anomalies," she said, "especially with layered sea ice, but this level of separation between the biological materials and the surrounding ice is unprecedented. It's almost as if the ship appeared here more recently than it should have." Oceanographers faced their own dilemmas. The Atlantic Spirit should have taken damage from waves, storms, and pressure systems. Yet aside from superficial frost damage, it remained intact. The hull wasn't breached, the windows were not shattered, and the vessel sat level as if placed there gently. One scientist described the phenomenon as a ship frozen in Glacier under circumstances that science currently cannot replicate in any controlled environment. Satellite imaging comparisons over the past 20 years revealed another inconsistency. Images of the ice shelf where the ship was found show no indication of a large metallic structure prior to 2016. Before that, the area appeared unremarkable. From 2016 onwards, subtle visual distortions began to appear, but nothing definitive until 2024. That 8-year window has become the subject of ongoing research. Did the ship somehow become visible only recently, or was it obscured by natural, or artificial, forces? The phrase ice shelf movement mystery has become shorthand among the scientific community for the entire case. Some experts have even speculated about atmospheric anomalies, sudden glacial collapses, or rare chemical interactions between saltwater and pressure-sealed spaces that might explain the preservation. But for each theory proposed, another crack forms in its foundation. The pieces do not fit cleanly. And the more they try to explain, the more the silence of the ice pushes back. This is why many now say that scientists are puzzled by the frozen ship. They're not just challenged by an unusual event, they are confronted with something that resists categorization entirely. The Atlantic Spirit has become a reminder that science, for all its tools and models, is still a work in progress. Nature does not always behave predictably. And in the case of this ship frozen in Glacier, the line between natural phenomena and the inexplicable remains frozen just as solidly as the vessel itself. The silence from above. When the frozen Atlantic Spirit was first confirmed, the public reaction was immediate and explosive. News agencies scrambled to verify the footage, social media platforms flooded with speculation, and families of the missing braced for answers they had waited over 2 decades to hear. But just as quickly as the headlines appeared, something strange began to unfold. The voices surrounding the discovery started to vanish. Governments initially offered routine statements, brief acknowledgements that a vessel resembling the missing cruise ship had been found near Antarctica. But those statements lacked detail, avoided timelines, and offered no confirmation of the ship's condition or contents. Requests for drone footage, satellite data, and forensic reports were denied or redirected through vague official channels. Journalists attempting to reach the scene were informed that the location had been designated a restricted environmental zone, closed to all non-scientific personnel. When questioned further, those same departments referred inquiries to international climate authorities, who in turn deferred to maritime regulators. The result was a dizzying bureaucratic fog. No one was speaking plainly. In the days following the viral leak of drone footage, several accounts that had shared the clips reported being locked out of their platforms. High-resolution images that once circulated freely were scrubbed or buried under algorithmic noise. The phrase "frozen ship cover-up" began to trend in conspiracy forums and alternative news sites. Independent researchers attempting to verify the coordinates of the ship received notifications that their access had been flagged. Several academic institutions quietly pulled researchers from the project, citing political concerns and threats to funding. No official reason was given. More troubling were the accounts from families of the missing. Some, who had long mourned in silence, now hoped for answers. Yet when interviewed by news outlets, many seemed hesitant, guarded. One woman, whose father had served aboard the Atlantic Spirit as chief engineer, said she had been contacted by officials advising her not to participate in any media discussions. Others were told to await formal communication through legal channels. Some families received direct requests to stop speaking publicly about the case altogether. The excuse: ongoing investigations. But after 24 years of silence, this sudden pressure only added to the unease. Inside sources claimed that portions of the ship's interior had been sealed off even to researchers. Digital records, including logs and surveillance footage from the ship's onboard systems, were said to be under review by undisclosed government agencies. Despite growing interest, no comprehensive report has been released to the public. Even now, as media interest reignites periodically, the dominant response from every official channel remains the same: no comment. This ship mystery censorship has become part of the narrative itself. The silence is no longer just eerie, it's strategic. Whether the reason is political, scientific, or something deeper, the suppression of information is clear. The Atlantic Spirit has returned, but the story surrounding it is being carefully managed, one unanswered question at a time. And perhaps that's the final clue. Because when a discovery this extraordinary is met not with explanation, but with denial, restriction, and silence, you have to ask yourself, why do officials hide discoveries like this one? And more importantly, what are they still hiding? For 24 years, the Atlantic Spirit was more than missing, it was erased. A luxury cruise ship, carrying hundreds of lives, vanished without a trace in calm waters, under clear skies, and with no warning. No wreckage. No distress calls. No answers. It became a story whispered in forums, debated by families, and eventually archived as an unsolved maritime disappearance. Until now. Its return, frozen between two towering icebergs in one of the most remote corners of the planet, has reignited a mystery far bigger than a missing ship. The details are as haunting as they are implausible. The ghostly silence of the ship's interior, still set for a dinner never eaten. The perfectly preserved belongings of passengers who simply vanished. The frozen clocks, the unfinished journal, the untouched lifeboats. Every inch of the Atlantic spirit is a question carved in ice, daring the world to answer. And yet, with every scientific explanation offered, another impossibility surfaces. A ship frozen in Glacier, but surrounded by ice layers formed years after its disappearance. Satellite records that contain no trace. Oceanic drift patterns that defy known current paths. Logs that end mid-thought. Crew members whose last words feel less like protocol and more like prophecy. These are not just anomalies, they are fractures in the narrative we've been told to believe. That every ship is tracked. That every voyage is accounted for. That the ocean has no more secrets left. But it does. The Atlantic spirit is proof. Was this just a rare convergence of natural forces, a glitch in the perfect storm of ice, water, and time? Or was it something more? A deliberate silence. A message frozen into the planet itself, never meant to be found. The more we try to explain, the deeper the mystery becomes. It's as if the sea gave the ship back not to solve the story, but to remind us that some truths resist discovery. What do you believe happened? Was this a case of nature outpacing our understanding, or was something kept hidden, something the world was never supposed to see? Let us know your theory in the comments. Share your thoughts, your speculations, or even your doubts. Because this story isn't just one for historians or scientists, it belongs to all of us now. And if this mystery chilled you, there are others. The ocean holds more than just water, it guards wrecks, whispers, and warnings. In future stories, we'll dive into other vessels lost to time, secrets swallowed by the deep, and clues that suggest the sea has a memory longer than ours. So if you're drawn to the unexplained, to the haunting silence of ghost ships and the forgotten edges of the world, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who still believe there's more to uncover. Because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't fictional.